Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are glad you're joining us this week for another week of listener requests.
Yes, we are on week 2, and I have to start this episode by saying, Larissa, you picked quite the case for us. Our lovely listener, Larissa, sent in the request for today's case, and I'm warning you, it is a doozy. We haven't covered a serial killer quite like this guy in a while now. No one was safe from this dirtbag, not even children. So I'm just giving all the warnings up front. This guy is awful. So awful that even he referred to himself as, quote-unquote, hatred.
Ooh.
This dirtbag earned the nickname the coast-to-coast or cross-country killer because he floundered across the United States, usually by train, killing as he went along. His transient life made it hard for people to realize that he was a serial killer, not to mention his wide array of victims, murder methods, and weapons.
So he's just all over the place?
All over the place. And so because he was all over the place and because he had so many victims, I cannot guarantee I'm going to say every name correctly. I apologize up front.
Oh, what a nightmare to research.
This was actually a nightmare to research. It's a good thing we love our listeners because I don't know that I would have picked this one on my own. This case is frustrating because, like we have seen in other prolific serial killers, he was in and out of jail, but seemed to always be released to raise more havoc. He managed to commit crimes and murders for a span of almost 2 decades. It can get a little confusing to keep track of all of his crimes. There are some murders that he confessed to, and many more that he is suspected of. It is believed that he started killing at the age of 15 and took the lives of at least 23 and possibly more than 70 people.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy.
It is a crazy case. As you can imagine, there is a lot of information out there about this killer. This case could be a series. I collected a few of my favorite resources, but then also read a book written by Diane Fanning. The book is titled Through the Window and is about the, quote, terrifying true story of cross-country killer Tommy Lynn Sells. I tried my best to sort through all of the information and hope I have done this case justice. There are a lot of victims, some not proven, so buckle up, my little buttercups. We are in for a rocky ride on a dirtbag road.
All thanks to Larissa.
Yes. So hopefully Larissa listens to this episode. Let us know if you do. Tommy Lynn Sells was born as a twin on June 28, 1964 in Oakland, California. He and his sister Tammy Jean were 2 out of 7 children born to a woman named Nina, and I think her last name is Brown. But I thought, how cute is Tommy and Tammy for twins, boy and girl?
That is pretty cute.
Tommy and Tammy were born in 3rd place. He had 2 older brothers, Terry and Timothy, his twin sister, and then he would go on to have 3 younger brothers.
All with T's?
No. But there was another set of twins, Jerry and Jimmy, and then a single birth who was Randy. As a mother, I know I would not have kept all of these similar sounding names straight when hollering for them, except for maybe Randy. I can't even imagine all these names. I'm not certain how many times Nina was married, but she did go by the last name Sells and Lovins. Unfortunately, she did not provide a very stable environment for her children. She was described as being uncaring. It is believed that a man named Joe Lovins was the biological father of Tommy and Tammy, even though publicly and lawfully, William Sells was their father.
Okay.
And I'm going to explain how this happened. I read that Joe might have actually fathered all of the children. William and Joe were somewhat friends. William had a more stable job and benefits, so he took responsibility for all the children. However, when he ran into financial difficulty, Joe would help him out. It almost sounded like he was blackmailed financially to take responsibility for all of the kids.
What?
Yes. So dysfunction right from the start.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
Right? I think because he had benefits and he had a job that was more stable, he was to take place as the father. But Joe was the actual biological father. And when he'd get in a pinch, Joe would help out.
So on paper, William was the father.
Yes.
Just so that they could get benefits.
I believe so.
Okay.
And so they took on the last name Sells because that was William's last name, but Joe Lovins was the actual one doing the lovin'.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or was it just an all-in-the-family type situation?
That could have been too, because I can't imagine that Nina and William would have lived all these years together and not have gotten together.
This is a weird situation.
It is, right from the start. In December of 1965, when the twins were 18 months old, after moving from California to Missouri, they both developed a fever, which was later diagnosed as meningitis. Meningitis is an infection and inflammation of the fluid and membranes surrounding the brain and spinal cord. Sadly, Tammy passed away from this horrible illness, but Tommy survived.
Was there any brain damage?
Well, there weren't any reports on how much Tommy was affected by the disease or if he for sure had it, but it is said that having meningitis can cause brain damage and behavioral changes. If this happened to Tommy, I am unsure. He is diagnosed with a few other things, which we will discuss in a bit.
Okay.
And when the children were sick, they didn't even know that it was meningitis at first. They thought it was pneumonia, and it wasn't until Tammy's autopsy that they realized it was meningitis.
Ooh, that's scary.
Mm-hmm. After his sister died, Nina, Tommy's mother, had a hard time coping, and so she sent Tommy to go and live with his aunt, Bonnie Walpole, in Holcomb, Missouri.
That would be hard.
It would. Tommy spent 3.5 years with his aunt, and it was said that his mother did not visit or even ask about him once while he was in her care.
Wow.
Just dropped him off with Bonnie and out of sight, out of mind.
Was she suffering from a clinical depression?
I didn't read that she was, but we're going to learn a little bit more about Nina, and I think it just fits with who she is as a person.
Oh.
With Bonnie, Tommy flourished. He loved to ride his bicycle up and down the sidewalk in front of their home. He said he wanted to be a firefighter when he grew up. Tommy and Bonnie bonded, and Tommy would later say that this time with his aunt was the only bright spot in his life.
Wow.
Bonnie had 2 daughters, aged 12 and 8. These little girls doted on Tommy, and he loved walking to the school with Bonnie each day to get the girls and walk home with them. When Tommy was 5, Bonnie started to look into what she would need to do to adopt the boy whom she viewed and loved as a son. Nina could not find the time to visit her son, but when she got wind of what Bonnie was doing, she hauled her butt to Missouri, scooped up her son, and never let Bonnie see him again.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Why? She didn't want him.
No, but she didn't want anyone else to have him either. She hadn't even asked about him. She hadn't called. She hadn't visited in 3.5 years.
But maybe the shock of losing him felt like losing her daughter all over again, and that's why she intervened?
Maybe. But needless to say, this would have been so traumatic for Tommy. He was ripped from his primary caregiver and never saw her again. And sadly, this would just be the start of the trauma in his life. And I honestly question if we would be even talking about him today if he had just stayed with Bonnie.
Yeah, it seemed like he had a good life there.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I was wondering if he would have felt like something was missing in his life with the death of Tammy. I have read things about twins having such bonds that even as children, they could be affected by the loss of one another. I imagine after leaving his aunt, Tommy would have felt very alone in life. I also read that as an adult, Tommy got a tattoo to honor his sister on his arm, so I'm sure he felt that loss, even though he was a young child when she passed.
The common misconception that we think that children can't understand loss when they're that little, but they absolutely do.
Right. Because he would have lost not only his twin sister, but his mother at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't know if mom was ever coming back or what happened to her.
And then to lose that other caregiver.
Right, who he really bonded with.
Mm-hmm.
Right from the start, when Tommy started going to school, it was said that he rarely attended. His absenteeism was described as chronic. Nina didn't really care if he went to school or not, and so she did not take the time to make sure he got there.
Was she the same way with all the other children as well?
That I do not know. I could not find reports, which was kind of frustrating. I didn't find as much information about Nina that I would have liked to have found. But because of this, the highest grade level that Tommy reached was 8th. But he wouldn't really become literate until one of his prison stays, where he actually took a literacy course and learned how to spell and read well.
Wow.
I honestly don't think Nina really wanted to have Tommy home, but just didn't want anyone else to legally have what she believed was hers. By age 7, Tommy was sneaking alcohol from his maternal grandfather, Pa Brown, to the point of drinking regularly.
At 7?
7. He was basically a 7-year-old who was abusing alcohol. His grandfather had a hidden stash under his truck seat, which Tommy would steal from.
And his grandfather didn't pick up on this?
Well, how did none of them pick up on this drunk little 7-year-old running around?
Yeah, that's crazy. But you would not be expecting a 7-year-old to be drunk. So maybe they just thought he was like really active or really sleepy, or I don't know how he acted when he was drunk, but...
The 7-year-olds are up in your face. You think you'd smell the alcohol in his breath even.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm remembering back to when my kids were that little. They're always hugging and kissing, but he was maybe not having that kind of relationship with his mom.
No, it doesn't sound like he was.
No.
And obviously nobody's actually looking out for him.
Right. If they were paying attention, I think you would notice that your 7-year-old was drinking alcohol daily.
Right.
It's not like it happened once or twice.
Unless they think it's just his personality.
Well, maybe.
If he's doing it that often and that consistently.
And maybe they did just think he was a weird kid. But I honestly think it was just because no one really paid enough attention to him to even realize what was happening.
But you think his grandfather would notice the alcohol missing?
But it was his secret stash. I think he'd get in trouble if he brought it up. He was hiding it for a reason. And Tommy had 2 older brothers who I would think would be a much more likely suspect. He probably was not thinking his 7-year-old grandson was taking the alcohol.
Yeah, that's true.
To me, it sounds like Tommy was just fending for himself in life. And since he wasn't getting the much needed attention from home, he started looking elsewhere. 8-year-old Tommy found the wrong type of companionship in a single adult man named Willis Clark.
Oh, no.
Yes. Willis lived in the extremely small nearby town, Frisbee, Missouri. He befriended Tommy to the point of having frequent sleepovers at his house.
And again, this isn't setting off red flags to anybody.
Right? At first, this man started just showing Tommy attention. He took him out and spent money on him. He taught him how to play pool. He would stay a few nights at a time, and when his mother did tell him to come home, he would get upset and insist on staying. He was being groomed. Sadly, Willis was a pedophile who targeted young boys. Before long, Tommy was practically living with Willis and then became one of his victims. Willis sexually abused Tommy and other young boys for years.
So there were other little boys that lived with him as well.
I don't know if they were sleeping over, but that he was abusing on a regular basis. Tommy later said that his mother knew what was happening, but she actually encouraged Tommy to stay over there. She basically gave her permission for it to carry on. I think she was just glad to have him out of her hair, regardless of the consequences at his expense.
Even go pick him up in the first place then.
Yeah, you should have just left him with Bonnie. Tommy said that his mother supporting this sexual abuse towards him had a huge impact on his life. And sometimes, when he would later kill people, he would relive this experience.
Like he was getting back at her or getting back at the sexual abuser?
I think getting out the anger. All those memories would come flooding back. And Willis was never charged, so he never saw justice for what happened to him.
No wonder he had this pent-up rage against him.
Mm-hmm. In an attempt to further numb his pain, Tommy began using drugs at the age of 10, specifically narcotics.
That's just a slippery slope, right?
Yes.
You just kind of keep trying to numb everything.
And at such a young age. When Tommy was 11, Joe Lovins, Tommy's presumed biological father, passed away. Tommy was devastated to learn that his father was dead. Tommy was able to go to the viewing, and I assume funeral, for his father.
So did the kids know that Lovings was their father?
They did. Tommy knew.
Okay.
As a child that Joe was actually his biological dad. During the viewing, a distraught Tommy stood by his father's casket and began talking to him. He expressed how messed up his life was and how he needed to talk to his dad and how much he was going to miss him. Before he could finish, his grandmother, Ma Brown, came up to him, smacked him on the butt, and pulled him away. She told him to, quote, stop it right now, and go sit down. This is so sad to me. He already felt alone in this world, and then wasn't even given the opportunity to properly say goodbye to his father. I assume she just wanted to stop Tommy from making some sort of scene. He didn't get to express his emotions and grieve the way he wanted to.
That would be difficult.
Very. Speaking of this same grandmother, at age 13, Tommy decided to strip naked and climb into bed with his grandmother.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
She was already asleep when he slipped into her bed, but as you can imagine, that did not go over very well when she realized what her teenage grandson was doing.
What was he doing?
He had just gotten into bed naked with her, and she realized. So she put an end to it immediately.
Was he drunk at the time?
I don't know. I think he was drunk and high a lot of the time.
Okay.
Ma Brown sternly said to Tommy, quote, "You better get your butt out of this bed and stop this crap."
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. And subsequently, Tommy was kicked out of the house for a time.
It's a weird thing to do.
And it's not the only time he does something like this.
Was he trying to be sexual? Like, was he making advances? Or was he, like, just getting naked because he slept naked and climbing into an available bed?
I think it was a sexual thing for him.
Against his grandma.
Yep.
Was she his grandma?
She was his grandma. I believe this is Nina's mom. It was Ma Brown and Pa Brown, and that's why I think Nina's last name was Brown originally.
Oh, okay.
And he was so young when the sexual abuse started, but that was the only time he was really given any attention after Bonnie from an adult in his life. So I don't know if it was some kind of messed up way in his brain to get attention.
Right, or he just didn't even realize that that was an odd thing to do, right? If everybody is approaching him and climbing into bed naked with him, then why can't he do that to somebody else?
Yeah, that could be. Tommy claims that not long after this incident, he came home to discover that his family, his mom and brothers, had moved out without him.
What? They didn't even tell him?
They didn't. His family do deny this accusation, but he is adamant that it happened. Tommy said he came home to a locked house. He looked in the window and saw the house had been cleared out. Apparently, Nina met a guy, got married, and moved to Michigan. They never said goodbye.
How long was he gone from the house for?
Well, he had got kicked out for a little time for hopping into grandma's bed all naked. And when he came home, I think, to visit or see them, they were moved out.
Wow. Okay.
And maybe she thought, no, I kicked him out. He's not my problem.
Was he considered like the black sheep of the family?
I do not have any other information about any of the siblings in their life. Just their rhyming names at the beginning.
An interesting family.
That's one word for it. And along that lines, I am unsure if Nina had specific disdain towards Tommy or if she treated all of her children like this. I also wonder if after Tammy died, Tommy became a reminder of what she lost. And like I said before, I wish there was more information out there on this, but unfortunately I couldn't find it. When Tommy discovered that his family had abandoned him, he lashed out and attacked a woman by hitting her with a pistol. Thankfully, she survived his fit of rage.
Just out of the blue, he pistol whipped her.
He did. And this is going to be the start of a pattern in Tommy's life. He's going to get angry and frustrated, and he's going to go lash out on an innocent person in very violent ways.
That seems like a pattern that a lot of individuals have that have been through similar situations like this.
Yes.
His level of violence must be the next level.
His level of violence is going to escalate to be one of the worst I think we've discussed. By the time Tommy turned 14 in 1978, he was pretty much living a transient lifestyle. He rode around on trains and lived off whatever he could steal from those he came into contact with. He saw the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, and the Las Vegas Strip. Throughout the years, Tommy did hold down the odd job. Some of these jobs included working for a towing company, a barber, a mechanic, a truck driver, a laborer, a used car salesman, and even a carnival worker.
And he switched jobs so many times because he had difficulty holding on to them?
I think he got the itch to move on.
Okay.
He totally was a lone wolf, drifting from state to state.
Well, he had been taught that he was a lone wolf.
Yeah, he really was. When he was 15, Tommy said that he killed his first victim. He was in Mississippi. He had made plans to rob a specific house. He was outside of the house waiting for it to become empty when he claims he saw a man molesting a child inside. Tommy barged in and killed the molester. About this attack, there has been no official evidence to connect Tommy to the man's death. There is also no official report of there being a molestation. According to Tommy, when he saw the young child being molested, he struck out in rage because of his own childhood sexual abuse. The man murdered was 39-year-old John Crade, who lived in Port Gibson, Mississippi. He was shot with a .32 caliber pistol. It was reported as a home invasion gone wrong. It sounds like Tommy's claims of John being a child molester were not accurate. However, Tommy admits that it was hard to remember who he killed over the years. So I do think he probably killed a man who was sexually assaulting a child, but I don't think it was this man.
Okay, and this is one of the suspected killings, not one of the for sure ones.
Right, but he's confessed to this one. And John Cade was shot with a .32 caliber pistol. So when he's making these confessions, it does seem that the facts do usually coincide with what Tommy is saying.
Okay.
So this is what we think actually happened. John was murdered on July 5th, 1979. According to his wife, Kathleen, sometime in the middle of the night when their family was fast asleep, she heard some type of weird popcorn popping sound. It turned out that Tommy had broken into their house around 3 o'clock a.m. and first helped himself to a drink directly from the milk jug from their fridge. John confronted the intruder and was shot. He died with his wife and son around him. He was the chairman of his church and was said to not have an enemy. And a little side note, Kathleen was the first suspect, but was thankfully later cleared.
Well, I guess the spouse is always the first suspect.
Mm-hmm. She probably made the 911 call.
She was in shock and not emotional.
Maybe.
Spoke in a monotone voice. Dead ringer.
Maybe she had just taken a life insurance policy out on him.
Yep.
But I think it is natural for police to automatically look at the spouse first.
Mm-hmm.
The following year, in 1980, Tommy claims that he killed a man with an ice pick near a Chinese food restaurant in LA. A few days later, while in Oakland, he got into a fight with a gang member. He almost killed this guy by stabbing him repeatedly, but he was also hurt in the process, badly enough to need hospital attention. He was stabbed in the back dangerously close to his spine. While at the hospital, Tommy became aggressive towards 2 nurses who were insisting that he needed a urinary catheter inserted due to bleeding in his kidneys. He caused a scene and went home for his mother to nurse him back to health instead.
His mother?
And Nina did.
That's an interesting development.
Right? And he does. We'll see this too throughout the case. He keeps going back to his mom. He'll stay for a bit and then he's kicked out or he's gone. And this is one of the reasons why he got kicked out again. In 1981, 17-year-old Tommy again went to visit his family who were now living in Little Rock, Arkansas. Sometime in May, it is said that Tommy tried to sexually assault his mother, Nina.
What?
Yes.
He is very messed up with his sexual appetites.
Yeah, he is. And he is going to explain a little bit of why this happened. But let me explain what happened first. Nina was in the shower and Tommy saw an opportunity. He got undressed and got into the shower with her. She freaked out and once again kicked him out of the house. I don't know for sure, but I read in one account that Nina basically beat the living crap out of him for trying to force her into sex.
Yep. That sounds on par.
Yep. The family insisted that Tommy get mental health help, but it didn't last long. He was admitted as an outpatient to the community mental health clinic in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Doctors questioned Tommy about the attack on his mother. He said he was just angry and feeling like he needed control over his life. He was hurting and in turn wanted to hurt someone else. Doctors described him as volatile and stated that he was aggressive, under-socialized, and suffered from conduct disorder. Tommy went to 5 counseling sessions, but then canceled his 6th session and never rebooked it. So these sexual advances are more about wanting control, feeling anger, needing to get that out of his system.
So had his mom done anything to make him angry?
Well, I think she'd done a lot of things to make him angry over the years.
I mean, in that particular moment, like why in that moment was he like, I'm going to get her now?
I don't know.
She was going to pay for all that sexual abuse that he experienced by being sexually abused.
I think so. And she was in the shower and he was like, oh, now's as good a time as any. This is perfect. She's already naked. And this does happen with Tommy throughout his killing career. He will just see an opportunity and in a split second decide to take someone's life.
That is very impulsive.
Very. Instead of getting the help that he needed, he turned to the bottle for comfort and his alcohol abuse worsened. His drinking problem led to his first arrest on March 27th, 1982 for public intoxication. His drug abuse also just continued to increase. Also in 1982, Tommy shot a man named Hal Atkins in Little Rock, Arkansas, but thankfully Hal survived. Tommy was robbing Hal's home, and when he was discovered, he shot Hal. Thankfully, Hal decided to play dead from the gunshot, and Tommy, believing that Hal was dead, fled the scene.
I was lucky that he did that.
When he wasn't attacking people or high or drunk, Tommy managed to find the time to fall in love and become a father.
No way.
Yeah, more than once. It was actually said that Tommy was a hound dog. His own mother even jokingly referred to him as her quote-unquote little whore.
Okay.
Tommy's just our little whore.
Lovingly, of course. That's how she referred to him.
Maybe not always so loving, but it said she was joking when she would say it.
She said it multiple times. This wasn't like a one-off?
Oh, no, that's how he was referred to. She would be like, oh, yeah, he's our little whore. And she would say that more than one time.
Because he would have so many children with different women.
I think just because he had so many sexual partners.
Okay.
Because this was even before he ends up getting married and having kids.
So he has a large sexual appetite then.
I think so. But I feel like this would not have been received well by Tommy because he does blame his mom for allowing sexual abuse to happen in his life. And then to be called a little whore from her might have stung a little differently for him.
Oh, for sure it would have.
Yeah. For any of us, it would have. Our mothers called us that, but especially in his circumstance.
So odd.
At the age of 18, Tommy fell for a woman named Cindy Hanna. He said she was his first love. Together they had a son. Unsurprisingly, Cindy's family did not approve of Tommy. Tommy stealing from the church that the family belonged to was just the icing on the cake. I am sure most people could clearly see just what a dirtbag this guy was. Luckily for Cindy, this relationship did not last long. Before fleeing this area, Tommy somehow found an accomplice to terrorize a woman with him. The pair kidnapped a woman from a fast food restaurant, took her to a secluded lake, raped and terrorized her, killed her, and then each grabbed an end of her by her arms or legs and swung her over the bluff they were standing on and discarded her body into the lake. This is the only time I read that he had an accomplice. And I have no information on who that was.
Okay. So you don't know if he was the one that instigated it and talked the other guy into it?
No, and I believe we only know about this because Tommy admitted to this one and did say, yeah, I had an accomplice with me.
Okay, so at the end, he just gets with a cop and he's like, yeah, I did this, I did this, I did this.
Yeah, at the very end.
Oh.
In 1983, Tommy lived in Breckenridge Hills, Missouri. It is suspected that on July 31st, Tommy murdered a 33-year-old woman named Colleen Gill and her 4-year-old daughter, Tiffany.
Oh.
Colleen's husband had come home just as he saw someone matching Tommy's description fleeing his house. When he went inside, he made the grisly discovery. Colleen and her daughter had been beaten to death. Their 1-year-old son was sleeping safely upstairs in his crib. At first, police again suspected the husband because of an insurance policy he had on his wife, but he was never arrested.
And you don't know what spurred on this attack?
No. I don't think he knew that the little boy was sleeping upstairs, or I don't know that he would have survived this either. And I think how horrific for this husband to know that he came home just moments too late. He literally saw Tommy fleeing their house.
And did he see him well enough to give a description to the police?
He did. On May 8th, the following year, Tommy was arrested and pleaded guilty to stealing a Mustang. He was given a 2-year jail sentence in Dunklin County. While incarcerated, a woman named Nicole Snow gave birth to Tommy's daughter. However, she placed the baby for adoption. Tommy got out on parole on February 18th, 1985. In July, he stole another car, but then decided to check himself into a rehabilitation center.
Well, that's an interesting move, too.
It was. But this didn't last long, because when his mother found out where her son was, she called the cops on him. And so he fled the rehab center, again not getting the help that he needed.
What was she turning him in for?
Because he had stolen another car.
Okay.
Which is such a dirtbag move. He's in rehab. Let him get the help that he needs.
But she wanted him punished for his crime.
Right. That was more important than getting the help that he needed.
Why couldn't it have been both?
Right.
He could have been punished, and then they could have kept him in the treatment facility.
But he got wind that his mother had told, and he fled before he could get arrested. Because now he's just done a little stint in jail, and he knows what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
Having to flee the police frustrated Tommy, and so he decided to lash out on more unsuspecting victims. At this time, Tommy was 21 and working as a carny at Forsyth Carnival. On July 26th, a 28-year-old woman named Ina Cord took her 4-year-old son Rory to the carnival. Tommy said that he went home with the single mother. He claimed that they had consensual sex. Tommy said that when he came back from using the restroom, he caught Ina going through his backpack. He immediately assumed she was looking for his cocaine stash to steal from him. Tommy saw red. He did not wait for an explanation. Instead, he grabbed Rory's baseball bat and repeatedly hit Ina with it as hard as he could, fracturing her skull. He not only bludgeoned Ina to death, but then also grabbed a knife in the kitchen and slit her throat with it to make sure that she did not survive. Rory had heard his mother screaming and was standing in the doorway watching what had just transpired. Tommy then took the same bat and did the same thing to young Rory because he was a witness. Rory was going to turn 5 in just 8 days and had been super excited about his birthday. Instead of celebrating, he was laid to rest next to his mother on his would-be 5th birthday.
Heartbreaking.
It really is.
And I'm just having such a hard time wrapping my head around the randomness of it.
It's all so random.
He's just flipping his lid and killing people.
Yep. When the urge comes, or if he sees an opportunity where he could get away with this, he takes it. A lot of them are split-second decisions. Ina and her son's bodies were found 3 days later by Ina's parents, giving Tommy ample time to skip town. The crime scene was said to be horrific. Ina had an 8-year-old daughter, but she had been out of town at the time of the double murder visiting her dad.
Good thing.
It's what saved her life. Tommy incurred more charges regarding driving intoxicated and charges involving underage girls. He again spent some time in and out of prison. And I just want to note that there are just so many murders to talk about that I won't cover a lot regarding his other charges. Just know that he was doing stints in jail along the way of his decades-long killing spree. But I will mention some of them. I also want to note that there are so many suspected murders that I won't be able to cover all the details of each of them in the time that we have for one episode. But I will mention all the ones that I found some information on.
Trying to wrap my head around why this is happening. But the murders, along with his other criminal activity, is all just pointing to his impulsivity. He has no control.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Along with stints in jail and murdering people, Tommy also had some close calls with overdosing on drugs. One particular time, he was found with a needle still sticking out of his arm while working on a shrimping boat. They were 2 days away from the shore and didn't expect him to live. But sadly, he did. He lived and would proceed to take the lives of so many more innocent people. And it is possible that Tommy might have killed some people while high and hardly had any memory of it. One of those times is believed to have happened in Lockport, New York on May 1st, 1987. A 27-year-old woman named Suzanne Korch was at a local bar and had gotten into a bad fight with her boyfriend. She stormed out and left the bar on foot alone, and she was never seen again. Tommy had been in the area and then quote-unquote woke up 2 days later, 2 states away, with blood all over his clothes.
He couldn't even recall what he did to her?
No.
But he thinks that he murdered her.
Yes, because he was right close to that bar when she was leaving, and she was by herself.
And did police find any evidence to connect the two? Like, were there fingerprints on her body?
No, Tommy was actually really good at covering his tracks.
Even when he was completely out of it that he wouldn't remember?
Yep. I don't think he left a fingerprint the whole time.
What?
Mm-hmm. And we have to remember, too, this was 1987. He doesn't get caught till 1999.
But still, fingerprinting technology was fairly good in the early 90s.
That is true. But even though police were really searching, Suzanne's body wasn't found for 8 years.
Oh, okay.
So there was a lot of time that had passed.
That makes a little bit more sense then.
Yes. If she had been found right away, maybe. But there are some that are found right away, and there is no evidence, hard evidence, that really connects Tommy to most of these until we get to the last one. Suzanne was found covered in garbage near a railroad trestle or bridge, which also points the finger at Tommy because we know that he got from state to state mostly by railway.
Mm-hmm.
On October 15th of the same year, Tommy struck again. A 20-year-old student from Reed College in Oregon had recently returned from spending 10 months in Europe and Asia. She decided that she wanted to finish out her adventure by hitchhiking across the United States.
Don't do it.
Don't ever. She started out with a friend, but on October 15th, she was alone. Stephanie Stroh started her journey in New York and made it to Nevada.
She did pretty good.
She did. She almost completed it. Her parents weren't overly worried about their daughter because they thought she was with a friend. She called to check in almost every day, and they did not know that she was hitchhiking. Plus, at this point in her journey, she was scheduled to be back home in just a few days.
Oh, so close to being home.
Mm-hmm. She was on the home stretch. Tommy saw Stephanie at the side of the road. She was beautiful, and by her appearance, he said he could tell that she was a hippie. Tommy pulled up to Stephanie and asked her if she needed a ride. She asked him where he was going. He responded by asking her where she wanted to go. When she said she was heading to Reno, he told her that that is where he was going.
How did he get a car?
He stole a pickup truck at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he steals cars all along the way. And I think that's another reason why he's so hard to catch. He doesn't have a registered vehicle most of the time. So unsuspectingly, Stephanie did hop into Tommy's stolen pickup truck. As they drove, Tommy offered Stephanie a hit of acid. He claims that she accepted his offer. Once the drugs started to take effect, Tommy pulled over and strangled Stephanie to death.
All because she was beautiful.
Yep, he just saw her in the parking lot. Ooh, I want that one.
But he didn't have sex with her.
Not this time. He does with a lot of them, though.
Like, how did he want her? Just to kill her.
Just to kill her. But he said that it was a thrill every time he did take someone's life.
So he is kind of getting off on it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely is. Overnight, Tommy took Stephanie's body and set her feet in concrete. The next day, the concrete was hardened. Apparently, there was already a washing tub and a bag of concrete in the back of the truck that he had stolen, so he seized the opportunity to use it.
He just wanted to see what would happen.
Well, he was going to use this in his plan to discard of her, because Tommy then took Stephanie's body to a 30-foot wide hot spring and dumped her feet first. Her body was never found. An interesting fact about this murder is that Stephanie's parents hired a psychic to try and help find their daughter. Although this psychic did not lead the family to discovering Stephanie's body, they did say that they saw her feet in concrete, which later matched Tommy's account of what happened.
Well, that's chilling.
Isn't it? Because it wasn't her whole body, it was just her feet. And I think he did this just in the bed of the truck overnight.
And so they made this connection to this girl because she was missing.
I think he said, I picked up this girl at this gas station. This is what I did with her. She was this age. This is what she looked like. And Stephanie did match that description. Tommy would only rest about a month before committing one of his worst group murders. And maybe one of the worst ones we've told so far. It is hard to tell, so it will likely be hard to listen to. Every murder is horrible, but this one is especially gruesome and horrendous to me. I know this case is a lot, but I did want to include as many of his victims as I could find information on because all of their stories do deserve to be told. On November 17th and 18th, Tommy terrorized a family in the extremely small and quiet town of Ina, Illinois. I read that there was less than 500 people residing in Ina at the time, and this was still 1987. Tommy was riding a train and decided to hop off near Route 57. Tommy made his way into the tiny town and looked around for his next place of attack. He saw a trailer that had a for sale sign on it, a trailer that was being rented by the Dardine family. The family consisted of 30-year-old Elaine, 29-year-old Keith, and a son named Peter, as well as a baby on the way. Elaine was pregnant. Tommy's story of how he got into the house does differ on different accounts. I'm going to go with the one mentioned in the book, Through the Window. In the book, it states that Tommy watched the house for a while drinking beer after beer. Finally, as darkness fell, he went up to the house and rang the bell. He had his hand on a pistol that he had stolen in Nevada, hidden inside his pocket. When Keith opened the door, Tommy said that he was interested in purchasing the mobile home. Tommy asked if he could come inside and take a look around. Keith declined Tommy's request. But as he was closing the door, just like in a horror movie, Tommy forced his way inside and immediately pointed his gun at Keith's head. Elaine grabbed 3-year-old Peter and tried to escape to another room, but Tommy managed to grab little Peter from her grasp and point the gun at the small boy's head.
What? He's going to kill the 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Tommy told the family that everything would be okay if they just did what he said. First, he instructed Keith to go find something to tie them up with. When Keith hesitated, Tommy pressed his gun harder into Peter, making him cry. So Keith quickly found a roll of duct tape. In front of Keith, Tommy bound Peter and Elaine, their legs, arms, and mouth. He then ordered Keith to come outside with him. Tommy forced Keith to get in his own car and drive the two of them a mile away. When they stopped, Keith tried to wrestle the gun away from the crazed man who was attacking his family. During this struggle, Tommy shot Keith in the cheek, but he was still alive. Angry, Tommy got out and dragged Keith onto the ground beside the car. He ripped down Keith's pants and cut off his penis while he was still alive.
Whoa.
He then held it up in his hand and told Keith that he was going to take this back to his wife. I cannot imagine the terror and pain that Keith felt before Tommy ended his life with 2 more bullet shots in his face and head.
I don't get it. It's so random.
It really is, which makes this so terrifying. Tommy felt the rush of murder and quickly and excitedly headed back to the Dardine home, knowing that he had 2 more victims waiting for him.
He's probably excited about it.
He was. When he opened the door, Elaine and her son were still bound. Being the disgusting excuse for a man that he was, Tommy removed the binding from Elaine's feet and cut away her clothing. He then raped this poor pregnant woman. He willed her into not fighting back by threatening to kill her son.
The 3-year-old.
Yes, who was also still bound. After he was finished, Tommy began rummaging through the house. Little Peter could not stop crying. Annoyed at the crying, Peter grabbed a baseball bat that Keith had gifted to his son and beat the poor boy to death with it. Elaine ran to try and defend her son with her hands still bound. Tommy threw her to the ground and hit her with the baseball bat as well. He was about to hit her again when he became shocked as to what was happening. Poor Elaine had gone into labor. Right before their eyes, in the middle of absolute carnage, Elaine gave birth to a daughter. She was only 3 pounds and 13 ounces.
Just from all the stress.
Yes. With the baby still attached to her, Tommy grabbed a knife and mutilated Elaine's breasts. He then took the bat to the baby, ending her short life.
What?
While she was still attached to Elaine.
What? I don't get his anger at everybody.
I know.
I like the ones that have reasons, Christy.
He's just a monster. No one was safe with him. And there was no way to track him. He just went wherever he felt like on a whim. And I believe that later this baby was named Casey by the family. Tommy continued to beat Elaine with the bat until her skull cracked. He then sexually assaulted her with the bat that was just used to kill both of her children moments earlier until she died. She was found with the bat still inside of her. Tommy took time to clean up and cleaned the crime scene as he had at other locations. Like I said, he was actually pretty good at getting rid of fingerprints and such. He placed the 3 bodies inside the bedroom and took the used duct tape with him. He then took off in Keith's car.
How is he so good at knowing what to clean up? He seems like he's in these delusional states when he's committing these crimes, but then he's so with it to clean it up.
I know, and he's high and he's drunk. Most of them too.
But he knows to take the tape so that they can't match it to anything else? Or is he taking it because it might come in handy on the next case?
No, it was the used up duct tape. There's no way that could be reused. You know how it all sticks together when you take it apart.
But he just took it to dispose of it.
Yeah, in case it had any evidence of him on it. Elaine's and her children's bodies were found by a family member. Keith was considered missing and at first was the police's main suspect.
Well, it would look that way.
Wouldn't it?
Until they found his penis.
Yeah. Well, I actually don't know if they ever found.
Oh, he didn't take it back to the wife.
I don't know. I didn't hear any more about the penis.
Oh, maybe he took it with him, with the duct tape.
Maybe. Yeah, I did not read that it was found at the crime scene. Maybe he chucked it out the window on the way back to the house.
Did he keep mementos?
No. No, he didn't. People who knew Keith knew that he could never do something like this to his family, and they were proven right when his body was also found.
That would be so devastating for the extended family members, for a whole family to be wiped out like that.
Yeah. And even the baby.
Yeah, that's just beyond cruel.
That baby probably wouldn't have even survived. Why do that?
It's just a sicko.
Tommy stationed himself in Florida for a little while and got a job. He was a drifter and always found a reason to leave. Along the way, he was still getting arrested for things like car theft. So on the run again, this dirtbag made his way to Salem, New Hampshire, where he snatched an 11-year-old girl from a convenience store, Melissa Tremblay, on September 11th, 1988. Tommy first raped this child and then stabbed her to death. She was found the next day face down on the railroad tracks. She had been run over post-mortem. Tommy made his way to Salt Lake City, Utah, and claims that he befriended a woman and her 3-year-old son. He coached the boy into holding a sign that read, quote, "Homeless and hungry, please help." People were generous with their donations over the span of a few weeks. When they had earned enough money, Tommy stole a black Dodge van and took the mother and her son to Idaho. He said he killed them both and dumped their bodies in a river. He then fled with their cash. In Tucson, Arizona, Tommy met another drifter named Kent Lawton. Tommy claims that he sold Kent a bag of marijuana. According to Tommy, Kent was going to pay him the next day. The next day came, and when Kent didn't pay up, Tommy punched Kent, making him fall to the ground. Immediately, Tommy was surrounded by Kent's buddies. They called him a chump and made him leave. Tommy was furious and felt humiliated, and so he came back in the middle of the night while Kent slept. Tommy stabbed Kent to death, even slicing his neck. When finished, he hid Kent's body under a bunch of leaves and left. His body was found 2 days later by a 12-year-old boy on December 18th, 1988.
Oh, that is sad. The way to ruin a kid's life.
Right? Tommy spent this Christmas in California. On Christmas Eve, he was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. But when the victim fled, they had to let Tommy go. Again, he slipped through the cracks and more people would lose their lives. Tommy claims that he killed 2 more people in January in California before moving on. A woman he believed to be a prostitute and a 13-year-old girl named Eileen Michaloff. By the month of May, he said he killed another 2 women in Roseburg, Oregon. One of them he raped before ending her life. After murdering these 2 women, Tommy was picked up for stealing $30 from a firewood stand.
Out of all the crimes that he has done, that's what they get him on.
Yes, and it just seems so ironic that it's these littler things that he gets picked up on. But he got caught literally red-handed, stealing money from this firewood stand. He spent 15 days in jail before being released. He must have honestly felt invincible at this point in time.
Yeah, no kidding.
In October, Tommy was ordered to a rehabilitation center in Nevada for 30 days. The rehab didn't stick, and in December, Tommy was sent to the hospital in Phoenix, Arizona for a heroin overdose.
Sorry, did they honestly think 30 days was going to fix this guy?
Well, it was what he was ordered by the court to go do.
I know, but it just seems so minuscule.
I know.
I guess he was just picked up for stealing firewood money, but still.
Yeah, $30. It's a pretty minor crime. So then when he went to the hospital in Arizona, they kept him for 2 days and then released him. Just helped him with the overdose.
Was it a purposeful overdose?
I don't think so. I didn't read anything that would speak to that. In January of 1990, Tommy was arrested for stealing a truck. He was sent to the Wyoming State Hospital for examination. Quoting the book, a doctor at this hospital described Tommy this way, quote, "A well-developed, well-nourished 25-year-old white male who looks very much like Charles Manson, with heavy, unkempt black beard, long shoulder-length brownish black hair. He looks dirty and disheveled. His mood is flattened." This doctor also stated that Tommy's thought process was bizarre. Tommy claimed that his tattoos of a bird, dragon, and wolf were talking to him and telling him to do certain things.
Yeah, that doesn't sound normal.
When arrested, Tommy had multiple substances in his system: alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamines, hallucinogens, and heroin. The doctors feared that a total detox would produce psychosis. The doctor determined that Tommy had severe substance addictions and had a personality disorder with antisocial, borderline, and schizoid features. Tommy was prescribed an antipsychotic as well as a medication to control his tremors.
That all sounds on point.
Tommy was sent back to jail, but was said to be rushed to the emergency room multiple times because of tremors, muscle spasms, slurred speech, and stuttering. It was believed that these ordeals were due to anxiety attacks, as well as needed medication adjustments. While incarcerated, Tommy took a course that took 265 hours to become a barber.
That is an interesting choice.
Yep. He does actually become a barber for a while. He also worked in a leather shop and a forest program.
Why a barber?
Don't know.
What would be the appeal?
I do not know. And 265 hours he completed. He was dedicated on finishing this.
And you said he worked as one too.
Later on, he did.
It's such an odd vocation.
Yes.
That is not what I would have matched him with.
No, not your friendly neighborhood barber at all.
Butcher, maybe.
Yeah, that makes me think of that episode that we did on Bob the Butcher Baker, because he was a baker and you wouldn't have thought that he was a butcher. In 1991, sadly, Tommy was once again released from prison. He headed to Florida. On December 9th, 1991, Tommy found his next 2 victims at the Christmas parade in Marianna, Florida. 25-year-old Teresa Hall and her 5-year-old daughter, Tiffany.
You're right. He's just all over the board.
He really is.
And it doesn't shock me that they didn't find him.
No.
Because there's no pattern whatever to connect.
There isn't.
And so do you think without his confession, they would have never solved any of these?
Oh, 100% I don't believe that they would have. Tommy followed the exhausted duo from a day of celebration home. After Teresa got her daughter ready for bed, Tommy busted through the door. Like an animal, he picked up their table over his head and thrust it to the ground, smashing it into pieces. Tommy then wiggled loose a table leg and used that as his weapon to murder the mother and daughter. When he fled the home just moments later, he was still tightly holding onto the table leg. Teresa and Tiffany were later discovered by Teresa's stepfather. He knew something was wrong the moment he saw the busted door. Tiffany was married, but her husband was away on a business trip at the time. And it just made me think that this case has so many people who were affected by Tommy's dirtbaggery. It is actually devastating.
It's so sad.
It really is. I know it's a lot of murder, so now I'm going to tell you about a survival story.
Oh, good. Thank you for breaking it up.
Yes. On May 13th, 1992, a woman survived an attack by Tommy. 20-year-old Fabian Witherspoon was house-sitting at 906 Grove Avenue in Charleston, West Virginia. She had gone on a walk to the Women's Health Clinic to get a pregnancy test. As she walked home, relieved that her test was negative, she spotted a man with a sign that read, quote, "Hungry will work for food." Being a kind-hearted person, Fabian stopped to talk to the man, who told her his name was Tom Sells. Tommy told her that he had a wife and kids, who all lived under a bridge and that they were all starving. Fabian let Tommy come back to the house with her and fixed him something to eat. She then filled a bag with groceries for him to take to his family. She filled another bag with some clean clothes. Tommy looked at the clothes and asked her if she had any extra underwear for his wife.
He wants her underwear?
He just wants to kill her. As Fabian entered the bedroom to grab his wife some underwear, Tommy came up behind her with a knife, and when she turned around, he ordered her to take off her clothes. Tommy forced Fabian into the bathroom and made her perform oral sex on him more than once. He also raped her in multiple ways, multiple times. Somehow, during the assault, Fabian spotted a ceramic duck on top of the toilet. She grabbed the duck and smashed it against Tommy's head. She said she saw people do stuff like this in the movies, and usually the suspect falls to the ground. But she had to repeatedly strike Tommy with the figurine. Tommy was startled, so she was able to wrestle the knife out of his hand. She made a run for it, but he grabbed her. Without hesitation, she repeatedly stabbed the filthy dirtbag who was attacking her.
Good for her for fighting back.
Oh, I'm so proud of this lady. The two wrestled in the process. Fabian was stabbed 18 times. Tommy managed to straddle the young woman and bind her arms and legs with tape. To secure the bindings, he ripped strips of fabric from the bedsheet. Wanting to kill her, Tommy grabbed a piano stool and beat Fabian with it. He made a quick attempt at slitting her throat before quickly grabbing a few items to steal and then flee the scene. He left the bag of food and clothing that Fabian had carefully gathered for him. Fabian was knocked out and Tommy assumed she was dead. Thankfully, she came to. She grabbed her phone, wrapped herself in a blanket, and ran out of the house to call 911. One of the officers who arrived at the scene said that he had never before seen someone with so much blood on them. Tommy had been staying with his girlfriend's daughter. Yes, he had a girlfriend. He had a few along the way. Gina Young called her mother, Tommy's girlfriend, and asked how to stitch Tommy up, because she had got him pretty good. Not too long after arriving at Gina's house, police showed up to the door. Because remember, Tommy had told Fabian his real name, so it wasn't that hard to track him down.
Because he didn't expect her to live.
Right. So he was probably feeling emboldened to say, yeah, I'm Tom Sells.
Yeah.
And she lived. He was first sent to the hospital for his injuries. His spleen and kidneys had cuts to them. One of his lungs partially collapsed, and he had slices on his testicles.
Good for her.
That's what I put. Good for you, girl. I'm glad. Tommy underwent surgery and was at the hospital for a week.
It's sad that they're using dollars to fix him. Is that mean to say?
No.
Oh,
I know. Even I was thinking, why couldn't one of those drug overdoses have worked? As terrible as that is to say, it would have saved so many lives. A trial followed, and for some messed up reason, the sexual assault charges were dropped. I was very angry, as you can imagine, when I learned that.
Was it some sort of plea or?
I don't know. He just gets a slap on the wrist. Judge Todd J. Kaufman sentenced Tommy on June 25th, 1993, to no less than 2 years and no more than 10 years behind bars for malicious wounding, with credit for time served. He had over a year credit already.
That is odd and so unfortunate.
It's so awful because he was very vicious in the way he violated her. While in prison, Tommy befriended a man named John Price. John told Tommy about his 26-year-old sister who was, quote, slow and childlike. He basically set up his vulnerable little sister with a serial killer, even though I'm unsure if he knew that Tommy was a murderer, because he hadn't ever been charged for a murder yet.
He had this assault charge.
But not a rape charge.
It's still an assault charge.
It was, but I'm sure Tommy was telling him lies. Tommy took advantage of Nora and got her to fall in love with him. The pair were married while Tommy was still in prison in April of 1996. Now his wife, Nora, sent 3/4 of her SSI checks to Tommy. I can't say if he had real feelings for her or not, but he did get 2 tattoos with her name in them. While incarcerated, Tommy was diagnosed as being bipolar. His illness went untreated, and he was released back into society in May of 1997. If Tommy had real feelings for his new bride, they weren't very deep, because soon after his release, he ditched her, but then called later and asked if they could get back together.
And she said no.
She said yes.
What?
He repeated this pattern a couple of times before taking Nora back to his mother's home in Missouri. Soon Nora was pregnant, and soon bloodlust once again took over Tommy. 5 months after being released from prison, Tommy would strike again. This time, he would murder a 10-year-old little boy named Joel Kirkpatrick in Lawrence, Illinois. Tommy broke into the home shared by Joel and his mother, Julie Ray Harper. Tommy quietly climbed in through a window of their home and grabbed a knife. He entered the first available bedroom and began stabbing the sleeping occupant of the bed, little Joel.
And he had just picked this house at random.
Yep.
He hadn't been watching them. He hadn't been anything.
Nope, it didn't sound like it. And he wasn't even always bringing in a murder weapon. Often he grabs a knife from their own home, or the table leg, or just something to injure them with.
Was he initially going into the house to steal and then got the urge to kill?
It said he immediately grabbed a knife and went into a bedroom looking for someone. So I think it was to kill.
This guy is evil.
He really is. He's evil personified. Julie heard a commotion and ran to save her son. Tommy hit her on her head. She fell to the ground, but then got up and began chasing her intruder. She had no idea where her son was. Julie raced out of the house. She had to decide in a split second if she should chase after Tommy or go for help. She chose to go for help.
Good choice.
Yeah, she probably would have ended up dead if she had chased him. Soon the grisly discovery of Joel's dead body would be made. Sadly, Julie was the main suspect in the death of her son. Police did not believe when she told them that an intruder would enter their home and just kill her son and then flee. Plus, she was going through a nasty divorce at the time. Julie actually spent time in jail for the murder of her son. Years. She wasn't officially cleared until Tommy's later confession.
Wow.
I honestly could go into a whole episode just on what happened with this one case. But unfortunately, we don't have time for that. But perhaps for a bonus episode one day, because it is so crazy how things unfolded for this poor woman.
Well, I can see why they suspected her, though, or at least didn't believe her story. Because it's unbelievable that he's just randomly popping into houses, killing people, and then running.
Right. It was just pretty wild. And the divorce was pretty nasty. And her ex-husband was a powerful man. But they were like, there's no way. Like, you had to have done this. And she didn't. And it wasn't until years later that Tommy's like, yeah, there was this boy in this area and this is what I did. And they're like, oh my gosh.
Well, and it doesn't seem like Tommy had time to clean up this crime scene. So why was there no evidence left behind of him?
I think because it was a shoddy investigation.
Okay.
They immediately believed that it was the mother of the victim. And I don't think that they did a very good job investigating this. Only 2 days later, after killing Joel on October 15th, Tommy kidnapped a 13-year-old girl named Stephanie Mahoney. Tommy had noticed Stephanie earlier and then snatched her in the middle of the night from her own bed. He drugged her with cocaine, raped her, beat her, and then strangled her to death. When he was done, he just went home to his wife and mother. Her body wasn't found for over a month. She was found in a pond by a group of hunters. Tommy did stay put for a while, working at a mechanic shop until he got the itch to run. He was gone by the time Nora gave birth. The baby was immediately put up for adoption, and Nina allowed Nora to continue staying with her.
So messed up.
In 1998, Tommy was again working for a traveling carnival. While working in Del Rio, Texas, he met the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her name was Jessica Levry. She had brought her kids to the fair. While Jessica watched her children enjoy the rides, Tommy enjoyed watching Jessica.
Oh, that's creepy. You never know who's watching you and for what reason.
I know. Tommy decided to shoot his shot and struck up a conversation with Jessica. He must have been a charmer because that night he ended up coming home with her for a quote-unquote cup of hot chocolate, but ended up staying a few nights. But I guess that was his pickup line, like, oh, gee, I could sure go for a cup of hot chocolate tonight. And so she invited him home and one thing led to another.
With her children.
Yes.
Okay.
The couple did a little bit of long distance before Tommy moved in with her and her 2 young boys and 2 teenage daughters. She had no idea who the man that she just invited into her home really was.
He's a changed man now, Christy. He's not going to do anything.
Well, he actually tries to be a changed man for a while.
Oh, so did he really love her?
I think he actually did. Surprisingly, Tommy was said to make an effort at a quote-unquote normal life with Jessica. Tommy got a job at a car lot and would spend his free time writing poetry and drawing pictures of roses for his new love. He helped her drive the kids to school and would take the boys fishing. It was even said that Tommy stopped his alcohol and drug use for a time.
Impressive, like cold turkey.
From what it sounded like, he wanted to be a better man for her.
This is just so weird because on one hand, he is so impulsive and yet he's actually showing quite a bit of willpower right now.
Yes. And I don't know for sure, but I did not read in one account that he beat any of the women that he was in a romantic relationship with.
That is interesting too.
Yeah, I didn't read about any domestic violence.
Wow.
Which kind of blew my mind. On October 22nd, 1998, the two lovebirds were wed. However, we all know that this matrimonial bliss would not last. A tiger is incapable of changing his stripes. I think a man like Tommy, after doing the things that he did, was not able to just live an upstanding life long term. The pair began fighting. Tommy resumed his alcohol and drug abuse and started skipping out on work. Fights that would result in Jessica kicking Tommy out of the house. They would make up and the cycle would repeat itself. In spring of 1999, after being kicked out once again, Tommy headed to Tennessee to release some steam the only way that he knew how. In Gibson County, Tommy became Deborah Harris and her daughter Ambria Halliburton's worst nightmares. Deborah was age 31 and Ambria was 8. Tommy approached the trailer. When he got to the door, he noticed it wasn't shut properly and he just walked right in. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and entered one of the bedrooms. Deborah was awoken by Tommy holding a knife to her neck. Not wanting to alert her daughter, Deborah laid quietly while Tommy raped her. When finished, he stabbed her repeatedly.
And she was quiet the whole time?
He says he thinks she didn't want to wake her daughter, because then the daughter would come running in.
Right.
Which did happen in some of the crime scenes. Tommy went to clean up when he suddenly noticed little Ambria staring at him in confusion. Tommy charged at her and stabbed her with such force that he lifted her off the ground. After stabbing her a few more times, he returned to Deborah and stabbed her one last time to make sure she was dead, leaving the knife sticking out of her chest. Deborah and her daughter were found by a friend on Easter Sunday. By this time, Tommy was already working a carnival in Greensboro, North Carolina. He stayed with the carnival for a while, ending up in San Antonio, Texas.
That's a convenient way to move around the country.
It is, and it is frustrating that Tommy was able to get away with killings for so many years, but I can understand how it happened. He didn't have a stable job and was in and out of states before police even started their investigations. He had nothing tying him down.
Yeah, exactly. He's got no family. He's got nothing.
Right. Well, sadly, you can see how this happened for so long. And I don't think all the states are talking to each other either. On April 18th, 9-year-old Mary B. Perez was enjoying the festivities at the Fiesta del Mercado in San Antonio. A bunch of her family were at this festival. At around 10 o'clock p.m., Mary's uncle said that he would buy all the adults a round of beer. The group started towards the tent, with Mary right behind them. Sadly, to their shock and horror, when they turned around, Mary was no longer with them.
He just snatched her?
Yes. While Mary's family frantically searched for her amongst the loud and cheerful bustle of the fiesta, Tommy had already taken Mary in his truck to a secluded area. Once he had her alone, he raped her and then strangled her with her own Mickey Mouse t-shirt.
Ugh.
Her little body was found 10 days later. And ironically, I found out that her father had been murdered when Mary was only age 2. This was a lot for this poor family to have to endure.
That is awful.
Isn't it?
Her poor mother.
Next, Tommy headed to Lexington, Kentucky, where he would instill more terror. 13-year-old Haley McCone was riding her bike to a counseling session when she decided to stop at a park and ride the swings for a little bit. Tommy happened to be passing by and saw that Haley was all alone at the park and that there was a well-treed area just behind the park area. This was a perfect opportunity in his eyes. Tommy walked up to Haley and forcefully shoved her off the swing. He put his hand over her mouth and dragged her to the woods, kicking and fighting.
Everything just seems so out of the blue with him.
It is. Yeah, he wasn't planning to kill anyone in that moment, but sees this girl in the park and, oh, there's some woods. Perfect. I'm on. Just ready.
He's flipping a switch.
Once alone, Tommy made her perform oral sex on him. At one point, a couple walked past the area on the pathway. Tommy held Haley's mouth so she couldn't scream. After the only possible help left, Tommy threw her to the ground on top of a bunch of dirty beer cans and raped her. He said that she silently cried while he did it. Sadly, it would turn out that this was not the first time that Haley had been sexually abused.
Oh, I did think that as soon as you said she withstood it silently.
Mm-hmm. She had had a very hard life in her short 13 years. Just like with his last victim, Tommy strangled Haley to death with her own t-shirt. When done, he rolled her body further into the woods and covered it with whatever debris he could find. Then he hopped on her bike and pedaled away. He later sold her bike to a random guy for $20. Her body was also found 10 days after her death. Her grieving grandmother called Haley, quote, the soul of my life.
So horrific.
It really is. Before Haley was found, Tommy was actually arrested on a different charge. He was in a rage and was publicly waving a box cutter around. He was incarcerated and attacked another inmate. Despite this, he was released once again from jail on June 24th.
Because it seems like such a little offense. That's what's so maddening, is he's getting picked up for these stupid little things.
And they have no idea the monster that he really is. How many times he was in police custody.
So he obviously wasn't conducting himself in a manner that he was flying under the radar.
No, I think at this point he's been doing this for, it goes on close to 20 years. He's just feeling invincible. I can do whatever I want.
He's just the crazy guy on the street.
Yep.
Everybody crosses the street to the other side of the road.
Right. After being released from jail again, Tommy returned to Jessica, who had now moved in with her mother, but she rejected her dirtbag husband. So angry and frustrated, Tommy headed to Oklahoma.
What's in Oklahoma?
Just where he decided to go next.
Okay. It sounded like he might have had a plan there for a minute.
No.
But no plan with this dirtbag at all.
No, just I'm angry. This is a pattern for him. He gets angry or frustrated and he flees to a new state and murders more people. And that's what he does in Oklahoma. In Kingfisher, Oklahoma, Tommy struck again. On July 5th, 1999, Tommy attacked 14-year-old Bobby Lynn Wofford. A few days earlier, Bobby Lynn told her mom she was going camping with a group of friends. She had lied and actually set out with a crowd that her mother did not approve of.
Don't do it, kids.
Her mother had no idea that when her daughter left on July 2nd, it would be the last time she would see her alive.
That is so sad.
I know. I always think of those moments when we do cases like this, that they just never knew this was going to be the last time.
It's the start of summer. You want your kid to hang out with friends, have fun.
And it was said that Bobby Lynn was just starting to go through a rebellious stage. So her mom didn't like the friends she was choosing, so she lied about which friends she was going out with. At about 4 o'clock in the morning on July 5th, Tommy pulled into a parking lot to sell a couple some cocaine. Once the couple left, he noticed a pretty young girl all by herself.
Out at 4 a.m.?
Yes. She was on her phone arguing with someone. Tommy decided to take advantage of the situation. He approached Bobby Lynn and asked her what was wrong. She told him she was trying to find a ride home. And of course, Tommy assured her that he could give her a lift. So I think this camping trip went awry and she was trying to get home.
Which even makes it that much more tragic.
It does. And I'm wondering, she probably didn't call her mother for the ride. She just wanted to get home and probably act like nothing was wrong. Once he had the young girl inside his truck, he asked her if she wanted any coke. When Bobby Lynn said that she didn't have any money, Tommy suggested that she had other ways of paying him. Bobby Lynn asked Tommy to take her back to the station, but he yelled at her to shut up. Once he drove to a more secluded area, he forced Bobby Lynn to perform oral sex on him. When he attempted to rape her, she viciously fought him, which ended in her kicking him in the genitals. This only angered Tommy more. In retaliation, to punish her, he grabbed a ratchet from the floor of the truck and sodomized Bobby Lynn with it.
Ugh.
Somehow, while this was happening, Bobby Lynn managed to get the truck door open and started running for her life, but she wouldn't survive. Tommy pulled out his gun and shot her in the head, killing her. As he was discarding her body, he noticed her nice earrings, so he grabbed them from her ears and stashed them in his pocket. Tommy wasn't known for keeping mementos, so I assume he took them in hopes of getting cash for them. It took 4 months for Bobby Lynn's body to be discovered. She was found on November 4th. I can't imagine. By this time, Tommy had returned to Del Rio and spent time again living with Jessica and her children. However, he'd be back on the road before Christmas. Tommy later admitted that he thinks he killed members of the Freeman family in Welch, Oklahoma. He was so high and drunk that he only has a bit of memory. His accounts, however, seem to coincide with the evidence. Tommy shot both Kathy and Danny while they slept in their waterbed. Next, he sliced open their abdomens, releasing their intestines, and then took an axe to Danny's body, severing his limbs.
Seems brutal.
It is. Tommy lit the house on fire with the help of gasoline. Strangely, only Kathy's body was found in the wreckage. Thankfully, the Freemans' teenage daughters managed to get out of the house safely. Tommy decided to go back to Del Rio to be with Jessica. She was upset that he had taken off for days with her van. This led to more fighting, and Tommy headed out on the road with his wife's van once again. On the millennial New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1999, early in the morning, Tommy would strike for the last time.
Finally, they're going to catch him.
Yes. He would try to kill 2 children. One he managed to murder, but another one of his victims would survive and help to bring this mother-freaking monster down once and for bloody all.
Goodness.
Tommy didn't venture too far from home. He just went west of Del Rio to Guajira Bay. At 4:30 a.m., he picked a double-wide mobile home to invade, and after settling the family's Rottweiler, he snuck through a random bedroom window of the trailer.
He charmed the Rottweiler?
Yep.
With the steak?
Nope, petting him.
Oh.
He just kept patting his head and petting him and calming him down, and then he was able to get in.
He's an animal whisperer.
I guess.
Or an animal recognizes another animal.
That's more likely, as he was. The room he entered belonged to 14-year-old Justin Harris. Justin was blind since birth, and so he assumed one of his sisters was pranking him. He blurted out telling the girls to stop coming into his room. He then rolled over and fell back asleep.
Oh no.
Tommy kept creeping. Next, he entered little 7-year-old Mark Surles' room. She was fast asleep. Tommy had flicked his lighter on to look at the girl. She looked angelic, and so he left her sleeping.
Oh. I did not expect that.
Me either.
Because the other women he found attractive, and he raped, well, I guess it's a little girl, but he...
7, but he's raped a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
He actually described how she looked. Her hair was over the pillow, her little long eyelashes and cheek were against the pillow. He said she just looked too angelic, and so he passed her up.
Oh.
Continuing down the hallway, Tommy entered the next room. This time, a woman, Krystal Harris, and her 12-year-old daughter, Lori Harris, were sharing a bed. Tommy touched Krystal's leg, but she didn't move. Again, Tommy wasn't satisfied, and he kept on walking, once again entering another room.
How many rooms are there?
There were quite a few, but he stops at the next one. But this, to me, seemed like he was almost window shopping, trying to pick out who his next victim would be.
It does have that vibe.
Right? The next room he entered contained a bunk bed. For him, this was the jackpot. On the top bunk laid 10-year-old Krystal Surles. 13-year-old Kaylin or Katie Harris was fast asleep on the bottom bunk. The room was dark and it was hard for Tommy to see clearly. Tommy closed the bedroom door behind him and leaned over Katie and whispered for her to wake up.
He wants her to be awake for this?
He does. He held a knife to her throat and climbed into her bed beside her. Tommy cut her clothing off of her and began touching her. Katie wiggled away from him and fell in between the wall and the bed. Katie yelled out for Krystal to go get Mama for help as she herself made a run for it, but Tommy blocked the door, cutting Katie in the process. She yelled out that he cut her, and so Tommy turned on the bedroom light. He had, in fact, sliced her arm. When the light flicked on, Krystal awoke on the top bunk. Tommy placed his hand firmly over Katie's mouth. He held her in front of him, his front to her back, and while Krystal made eye contact with Katie, warning Krystal with her eyes not to move, Tommy slit Katie's throat twice. Katie fell towards the wall, ripping down a poster as she fell to the ground, gasping for air. He'd stabbed her a total of 16 times.
He just went crazy.
He did.
Was he angry that she had tried to run?
I think his plans were to kill her, regardless. Terrified, 10-year-old Krystal promised Tommy that she wouldn't tell anyone. Tommy went for her neck. Krystal tried to cover her throat with her hands. Tommy pried them away and ran his knife across the little girl's throat, severing her windpipe. She could not scream. She just laid there, motionless, hoping that the man would think she was dead and leave.
That would be terrifying.
I cannot imagine. She's 10 and she's just seen her good friend be murdered.
And to lose your voice.
Yes.
That would be awful.
Mm-hmm. She could not scream out for help. Miraculously, what she wanted was what happened. Tommy turned the light off and left the girls' bedroom, thinking he had killed them both. Even after Tommy left, Krystal stayed motionless in her bed, too terrified to move.
I don't know how you would do that. She would be in so much pain.
She was more terrified. She was petrified. Finally, she managed to get out of the bed in the dark. She stumbled over Katie's body and laid down next to her for a minute, trying to comfort her. Katie was still making sounds, but would not survive her injuries.
Oh, that is awful.
This guy is awful. When Krystal thought she heard a car pull away from the house, she got up and ran from the house. She assumed everyone else was already dead. Krystal traveled a half-mile down the road. She went up to the home of Herb and Marlene Betts and rang the bell. It was 4:58 a.m. Krystal later said that while she stood on that porch, she kept praying to God to please not let her die. Startled to have someone at his door so early, Herb yelled out, asking who was there.
She can't answer.
No, Krystal was unable to answer due to her injury. Instead, she kept ringing the bell. Herb turned on his outside light and peered out the window. He quickly flung open the door. He could see both ends of Krystal's windpipe spilling out of her neck, and a huge amount of blood that had begun clotting from her neck, hanging down to her chest. The young girl was covered in blood, and I cannot even imagine being woken up to this.
It's so sad that she thought everybody else was dead because there was help right available in her house.
There was, but they were, I think, one of the last bedrooms, and she probably thought we were the last room that he hit. Which they were the last room, just he hadn't murdered the rest of the family. The couple quickly called 911 and then gave Krystal a pen and paper and asked her who did this to her. Herb said thoughts of his own grandchildren kept entering his head. Krystal sat on the kitchen floor. She later said that she was afraid that she would get blood on this nice couple's carpet.
Oh my goodness.
What a sweetheart. The Betts didn't know Krystal. She and her family had come from Kansas to spend time with the Harris family. With instruction from the 911 operator, Herb and Marlene tried to stop the bleeding from Krystal's neck. Suddenly, they realized that the ambulance had driven past their house. So Marlene ran out to the road to flag them down.
Oh no. But was that because somebody had called from the other house?
Actually, no, because it's the police who go and wake up everyone from the house.
Oh.
They had no idea. They're still fast asleep.
They don't know that Katie's dead.
No, and that Krystal is not in the home and is severely injured. They're all still sleeping. While Marlene was outside, Krystal wrote the question to Herb, quote, "Will I live?" Herb didn't think that she would survive the attack, but he kissed the little girl's forehead and assured her that everything was going to be all right. Krystal was rushed to the hospital and then quickly transported via helicopter to University Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. Meanwhile, authorities were sent to the Harris's home and had to wake up the residents and discover Katie's body. I honestly have no words what this would have been like for them. They were family friends, getting together for the holiday, excited to spend New Year's Eve together, and all of a sudden, they were living their absolute worst nightmares. When police entered the room with the bunk beds, they discovered Katie and saw that blood was covering all four walls of the bedroom. Everyone else in the house had slept through the brutality of Tommy Lynn Sells. At the hospital, things were touch and go, but talented medical staff and surgeons were able to save her life. To say that this was a close call is an understatement. The sheath on Krystal's carotid artery had been cut, but the artery itself was intact.
That is incredible.
Right?
And she didn't injure it more?
No.
As she moved around or?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
Krystal was unable to talk yet, but she was adamant that she wanted to help police catch the man who murdered her friend right in front of her. Krystal, through expressing herself in written word, was able to help a sketch artist come up with a very detailed drawing of Tommy. She was still recovering, and this took a lot out of her, but she was determined. And honestly, if she wasn't, I am certain that Tommy would have continued to murder more people. Little Krystal essentially saved the lives of so many unknown victims in the future. Tommy himself even admitted that he would have just kept killing, that he couldn't stop.
It's amazing that she did that, but at the same time, it means that his face was so ingrained in her head that she couldn't forget it.
Yes, that's true too.
It's just so awful.
Really sad to think about. But he was facing her too when he murdered Katie.
Yeah, and that image is so ingrained in her head that she was able to create such a detailed sketch.
Yeah, and it's very accurate. I saw a picture of it. Krystal was presented with pictures of perps who looked similar to the composite sketch. After carefully studying the pictures, this little hero was able to point at Tommy Lynn Sells with certainty that he was the man who attacked them while they slept. And it was said that they gave her a bunch of different pictures multiple times, and every time Tommy was in the pictures, she picked him out. She knew. Tommy lived only 5 miles away from the Harris's home with Jessica and the kids. In the early morning hours of January 2nd, 2000, police swarmed their mobile home. How they got inside is nothing short of genius. When officers approached Tommy's house just before 6 o'clock, the dog started to bark. Tommy came outside to hush them. When he did, he saw the officers approaching. Thinking quickly on his feet, Lieutenant Pope told Tommy that they had received a complaint from his mother-in-law. Tommy had just made threatening phone calls to his mother-in-law, so he believed that this was the reason why the officers were at his home.
Oh, but the officer didn't know that. He was just making something up.
I'm guessing that he did know that.
Okay.
In his eyes, I am sure he was not worried. He had gone to jail and gotten into trouble with the law before, plenty of times, but had always gotten away with murder.
Yeah, this is no big deal.
No, his heart rate probably didn't even increase. Tommy let the officers come into his home, and when he did, he was immediately cuffed and arrested for murder. Tommy played dumb, but acted like he didn't care that he was being arrested for murder. Blood-soaked clothing was found at the property. Jessica confirmed that the clothing belonged to her husband, and it would later be determined that the blood belonged to both Krystal and Katie. Knowing he was caught, Tommy started spilling the beans, and he had an awful lot of them to spill. It seems like he was fairly honest in his confessions, even though some people are skeptical that he killed over 70 people in total, as he claims, but I believe it. One reason I tend to think he was telling the truth is because regarding Katie's murder, he admitted that he sexually assaulted her with his fingers before killing her. This admission meant that the murder was a capital murder charge and could result in the death penalty.
Did he know that beforehand?
I believe so.
Was he relieved to be caught?
I don't think so, and that's because of the way that he eventually pleads.
Okay.
But before we go on, I am very briefly going to mention the names of some of the other victims believed to belong to Tommy. In 1982, in Little Rock, Arkansas, it is believed that on April 27th, Tommy murdered Joanne Tate and attacked her daughters. Joanne, aged 35, was raped with a broomstick and then stabbed to death. Her 2 daughters, aged 4 and 7 at the time, were both stabbed but survived. On February 28, 1983, in St. Louis, Missouri, Tommy claims that he raped and killed a little girl between the ages of 8 and 10. Her body was found, but her head never was. In 1997, in Twin Falls, Idaho, Tommy admitted to raping, killing, and then cutting up a woman with an axe before burying her body pieces. He was unsure of her name. He did the same thing to another woman in Vegas later that year, 19-year-old Yvette Sophia Mueller. On April 15, 1998, in San Antonio, Texas, he said he shot a man named Thomas Brose, who was 40 years old at the time. These are just a few, but sadly there are many more. Like I said, most are not proven, but I would be shocked if Tommy didn't kill these people that he claimed to. Part of the issue, I think, is that he was so intoxicated and high most of the time that he always didn't have a complete recollection of what happened. But it seems like most of what he did remember matched the evidence. Sadly, I also think that there are victims out there that he doesn't even recall.
Which is just so sad.
While being held in jail, Tommy and his wife, Jessica, exchanged love letters on sticky notes. Jessica professed her love for her husband. In an attempt to explain himself, Tommy wrote a note that read, quote, "There was a boy who grew up lost in this world. Never knew where to go, never knew where to turn. The boy grew up to be a man, well, somewhat of one. But he never knew where to go and still's lost to this world. He fell in love. Oh, how good his heart felt. How special she was to him. Always a warm touch to offer. But he was lost to this world. She gave and gave, he took and took. He tried his best to give back. But you see, he was lost to this world. He grew up lean and mean."
More introspective than I would give him credit for.
Yes. I do think that Tommy loved Jessica, and that is why he kept coming back to her. It is sickening to think about, but after his last murder at the Harris house, Tommy cleaned up and then crawled into bed with his wife and asked her to hold him. She lovingly did so until he fell asleep.
Oh.
Jessica, though, did divorce her dirtbag husband in 2002.
Did she continue to see him, though?
Not after the divorce.
Okay.
That being said, I did read that Tommy never officially divorced his first wife, Nora, and so that wouldn't have made his marriage to Jessica legal. I also read that even after everything came to light, Nora said she still loved Tommy and never divorced him.
That's odd.
Very odd. Tommy's trial started on September 15th of 2000 for the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Krystal. Despite his initial confessions, he pleaded not guilty to the murder charges, one including committing a burglary during a murder. The only charge he pleaded guilty to was the attempted murder of Krystal Surles. Tommy's experience with the courts made him confident that he would get away with murder. He even wrote down on a piece of paper, quote, "I'll walk," during his trial.
No way.
Yes, I saw a picture of it.
That is disgusting.
Right? But that's what had been happening for years and years and years.
It's true. But this is different. He's up on murder charges.
Well, that's why he's pleading not guilty to the murder charges and just guilty to the attempted murder, because he figures he will get a way less sentence. As if Krystal hadn't been enough of a rock star already, she bravely testified during his trial. Tommy asked if he could be removed from the court during her testimony, but the judge dismissed his request.
Yeah, no kidding. You face what you've done, you dirtbag.
Yep, and he had a hard time doing that. Tommy could hardly bear listening to Krystal tell what happened. It was difficult for Krystal to tell, but it was also hard for Tommy to hear, and I am glad that he was squirming and emotionally suffering. Herb Betts, who was retired military, also took the stand and told his account of what transpired after Krystal rang his door that frightful morning. I won't go into more detail of the trial. There is a lot of good information in the book I mentioned if you want more details. Ultimately, Tommy Lynn Sells was found guilty on all 3 charges, 2 capital murder charges and 1 attempted murder charge. Tommy was later sentenced to death in the state of Texas. It was said that Nina, Tommy's mother, had a heart attack when she heard of the horrific things that her son had done. 49-year-old Tommy was executed on April 3rd, 2014 at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. He was put to death by lethal injection.
And his last meal?
There was no record of his last meal. I know, I always like to know what it is. When the pentobarbital was administered, Tommy took a few deep breaths and then closed his eyes. He began to snore before his heart finally stopped and he left this world for good. And this seems like a death too good for a man like Tommy. Tommy refused to give any final statements despite the now-grown Krystal Surles and members of the Harris and Perez families being present. Before we go, I'm going to end with 2 quotes that Tommy did make. He had explained that he was addicted to murdering people. He said, quote, "The first time I did a shot of dope, it was the best feeling I ever had in my life. The first time I killed somebody, it was such a rush. It was just like that, a shot of dope every time I did it. It was that rush again, and I started chasing that high."
He was literally addicted to murder.
Yes, and that's why it was just so random and chaotic, and so frequent. When describing himself, Tommy said, quote, "I am hatred. When you look at me, you look at hate. I don't know what love is. 2 words I don't like to use are love and sorry, because I'm about hate."
I think you're covering up a lot of vulnerability there, because very obviously he loved Jessica.
I think that he did love her.
And were those statements made after Jessica left him?
Oh, I'm not sure when, but after he was incarcerated.
Yeah.
And that is a case of a man that was hate and evil personified, the ruthless and merciless cross-country killer dirtbag, Tommy Lynn Sells.
Well, thank you, Larissa.
Larissa, I hope I did this case justice. Thank you for listening to our podcast and for suggesting this case. However, I do have to say that I am certainly glad I am finished with this one.
But we're not finished with listener request. We'll be back again next week with another one.
Until then,
see ya.
Bye.
I'm so absent-minded. Oh, man.
Okay, we're retesting.
Retesting, because I forgot.
That we tested.
And I moved my mic.
I put December of 1995 when they're 18 months old. They aged really slowly. Tammy's autopsy that they found out.
Autopsy again.
And it wasn't until Tammy's autopsy. And it wasn't until... If you hear music in the background, I apologize. My daughter is having a shower with her music blaring while we're trying to record.
All right, I gotta adjust. My butt is asleep and my leg is going numb. Okay. Good to go.
Okay.
Wow.
Gee whiz.
Wow.
Oh my.
That's because I ate the packet of cookies.
Well, now we're done the cookies.
I'll take a gummy bear.
Looking at you is going to make me cry.
What's wrong?
I have something in my eye. I can feel it. It's scratching, but I can't get it out.
So pull your eyelid out and pat the top of your head.
Are you just trying to see how gullible I am?
Pull your eyelid out
Yeah.
And then pat the top of your head like this.
And something will fall out while I'm feeling dizzy.
See, it's better, right?
I don't know. Wait, I gotta do more on this side. Is that what you told your kids when they were little?
Listeners, you should see her now.
I tried it. It's not better. You lied.
Oh, you look like a fool. Make me feel better.
I'm glad one of us does.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.